From the racing capital of the world, Indianapolis, Indiana, welcome to yet another fantastic episode of the greatest spectacle in podcasting, the Seventh Year Over Rev Show. As always, I am your host, Kevin Krauss, and this week's episode, as per usual, is brought to you by our great friends and partners over at KraussMeats.com. That's small batch, handcrafted, artisan quality with over 100 years of history. Make sure you check out KraussMeats.com for their latest and greatest in their offerings, as well as our good friends and partners over at Respect Your Package and Dick Carriers, makers of that high-end, breathable, high-performance men's underwear. They are respectfully scandalous yet unapologetic. And holy crap, Seventh Year Over Rev fans, I am so stoked to talk to this young man today here. He's a man after my own heart, being an open wheel guy. The both of us, he is kind of that guy that is chasing that dream. He has been an open wheel guy for a while. He's racing in England, and we are fortunate enough to get him this week because he is about to get on a plane Saturday at some point here to fly back to England to continue his open wheel dreams there in England. It is our new friend and friend of the show, the one and only Mr. Jason Pribyl. Jason, welcome to Seventh Year Over Rev, man. How are you?
Hey, I'm happy to be here. It's a great day, and like I said, happy to be on here. Thanks for inviting me. And yeah, I couldn't be happier to share this moment with you. Probably my last interview before heading off to England, and yeah, looking forward to talking about it.
See, I'm telling you, Seventh Year Over Rev fans, this is what we do. We get them before they're going off to bigger and better things. So the cool thing, one of the cool things that I really kind of, for lack of a better term, glommed onto with Jason is that he and I are both Midwest boys. He's from the Chicago area, so he is familiar with all the same tracks that I am, whether it's Black Hawk Farms, Road America, the Audubon Country Club, you name it. He's raced them all, as have I. So what I think our Seventh Year Over Rev fans and listeners want to know is there's not a whole lot of Americans that started the way you did and then decided to go on to Europe. So I know you started off karting, you did some Spec Racer Ford stuff, some Miata stuff before you even got to Europe. But where was this in the family? Did this all were your parents racers? Did they work races? How did this fever for racing for you begin?
I think for me, there's a couple of, sources of it, right? I am a first generation driver. So my dad went to high school in the same town that I did, grew up in the same area that I did. We're Midwest through and through. And so, being around us, we don't have a ton of racetracks and things like that. But one thing that my dad did with his father and my grandfather did with all of his friends was they ended up going to a lot of the Road America races. So whether it was the motorbikes or the historic races or June sprints, whatever it is, they would go there, just watch the races. When it was time for my dad to bring me along, that's where I kind of got the bug, and I think I was just the one dumb enough to want to do it, right? And at that time, they had built a kart track, and it just, for whatever reason, seemed like a good idea at the time to get me into that. My dad was in marching band. He was, a full IT guy, and I was into sports. I played hockey, baseball, football. I wanted to do everything, right? And for him to try to, find a way to connect with his son, he felt like racing was the best option, and it kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah. So at some point, your dad was probably thinking, I have opened Pandora's box, and now this is a much more expensive proposition than I had planned on.
Yeah, that unfortunately happened pretty early on. I spent probably half a year of testing. I started at age 6 and went into my first race and I won it. And then I kept winning. And that was the point where he just realized he's like, okay, he's a bit of a natural at this. We have to keep doing this. And I got into a car pretty early on as well. And obviously, we'll talk about how I ended up in England at that point because as a first generation driver, that's not the first thing you do. But yeah, no, it's just been one of those things that yeah, like I said, it got pretty big pretty fast.
So with the big success that you enjoyed early on, like right out of the gate in carts, and then as you kind of moved up, did you ever wind up going through like a proper racing school, like a Skip Barber school or anything like that at any point? Or did you just kind of keep figuring it out on the fly?
Yeah, so for karting, not really, no. I mean, I had a couple of friends, give me pointers here and there, people that had been racing longer than me, a couple of years older than me. It was always just my dad and I, right? So, he had worked on cars a little bit, but never on go-karts, never on anything racing, right? And you and I both know that that's a different world than just making a car move. It's about making it go fast. And that was something that we just all had to learn on the fly. There's probably plenty of stuff that he can talk about that I don't even know about with the level of research that he did. But yeah, so it's just not much school, not much practice. Obviously, to get your license to go into cars, you do have to go through a school. So there's a couple of options. You've got the Skip Barber, you've got the Lucas Oil Race School. Local to us, you've got Level Up, which is partnered with, I think, Advanced Auto Sports with Spec Miatas. I chose the Lucas Oil School. I had a couple of friends go through that before me, a couple of years older than me, and they seemed like it was the right fit. At the time, Skip Barber wasn't running, and so that was just the option for us. So I did two days of Lucas Oil Race School, got my SCCA full competition license at age 14, and started racing cars.
Nice, nice. Yes, that Lucas Oil School, it certainly came into play at a good time. Obviously, that was when Skip Barber was going through all their reorganizations, and I know the Level Up guys. I know Pete Stoltz very well. They can only do so much, right? Lucas Oil, especially if you got the idea to go open wheel, but you've raced a whole bunch of stuff before you kind of settled in on the open wheel. I mean, I saw you had a double win at the Cat National up at Road American and SRF. You've done some Miata stuff. What became the point where you were like, okay, I want to go open wheel racing versus either like a SRF where it's kind of a full bodied fendered car or a fendered car like a Miata? Was it I mean, what was the thinking behind that decision?
Yeah, I think it comes down to a little bit of my ego, right? 15, 16 years old, I wanted to race the coolest looking car. I wanted to race the fastest car. And, ultimately, I just wanted to race what I enjoyed watching the most. That happened to be IndyCar, and that still is IndyCar at the time. And so for me, open wheel was sort of the obvious choice. It was just about getting my hands on the opportunities. So my first race was in a Formula Ford at the end of the 2021 season at Pit Race. After that, I raced a full season of Formula Enterprise 2. And when I won that championship, the team owner, Tony Grau, who I'm sure many people listening to this know of, he talked to me and said, if you want to move up, the road to Indy is the way to do it. We won a championship with you, and I'd be happy entering the road to Indy with you. And so we had a long discussion about that, and by the end of it, we just couldn't muster up the money to figure out how to get a team up and running like that. So it was a bit disappointing, and that's when I made the move into the Spec MX-5s. Did that for a little bit and didn't really find my footing in that car. It was one of those where I have this unfortunate opinion that it's just simply not fun to drive cars that aren't meant to be race cars. I know I'm going to ruffle some feathers with that, and it's fun. It's fun in its own way, but I don't look at it in the same light that I do even like a Formula Ford or something. It's more frustrating than fun for me. And so after the Spec MX-5, we moved into the SRF3 because we just needed some time to rest and reset and kind of find our focus. And that was a great car to run. Great racing. That was the biggest reason that we wanted to do it, was because I felt like I needed a little bit more combat experience. The FE2 was good from a car perspective, but the racing isn't as close as, one might like. And the Spec MX-5 stuff is a very particular kind of racing. And so finding that healthy medium with the Spec Racer Ford was kind of the right move for me. Over that season, I did a couple of Formula Ford events as well. And that's where we finally got our footing into okay, we know what we want to do, and now we just have to figure out how to do it, right? And that was sort of the running factor. Um, and at the end of that season, we did a no, at the end of the Spec MX-5 season, we did a test in a USF 2000. And that was really where it kicked off because we did the Chris Griffiths test at Indianapolis. And my first ever time in a USF 2000, by the end of the weekend, I was second out of 25 cars. And, you know, these are people that have been running those cars for the entire season, and I had run them for a couple of days. And so that was where we kind of realized that I still had the ability to continue moving in the Formula car ladder. So, short story long, basically, I like Formula cars.
Well, and you're going to get no argument from me. I mean, I've driven them both. I started out in open wheel racing, Formula Ford, Formula 2000, Formula Atlantic. Was able to get my Indy Lights license some years back. Race sports cars too, but I think especially when it's early on in your career and you get that feeling in an open wheel car where you can really kind of feel where you're at the edge of those slicks, and you can feel the aero working, you can feel the draft pulling revs. You kind of get spoiled, right? When you move into something else, anything else feels slower, sloppier. It's just like, I mean, as good as it could be, it still feels like a pig. Nothing against the guys that are running, GTDs and things like that, but obviously, with the success that you had in a relatively short amount of time and the results of that Chris Griffiths test that they do here every year at Indy, you're opening eyes, right? So at some point, that had to have led to the conversation about the possibility of going to England. And I want to get to that here in just a second. But before I do, Seventh Year Overhead fans, if you like this kind of content where we get to talk to cool up and coming drivers like Jason and like some of the others that we've had on, not to mention the established stars that we've talked to before, make sure that you're liking what we're doing here. Hit that like button. Make sure that you not just hit, but smash that subscribe button. We're fortunate enough to say that we are now over 12,000 downloads all time, and we're heard in 117 different countries, including where Jason's going here on Saturday in England. So make sure that you do that as well. Make sure that you're supporting our great sponsors, KraussMeats.com. They've got a newly redesigned website to make it a little bit easier for your shopping needs as we get closer and closer to grilling season. Make sure they've got everything from those handcrafted artisan sausages to beef jerkies, snack sticks, you name it, they've got it. Go check out KraussMeats.com, and they ship all over the continental United States. As well, our great friends and partners over at Dick Carriers and Respect Your Package, that high performance underwear. We just did an episode with the CEO of Dick Carriers. They have that breathable ball bustier technology. They are fantastic. I'm wearing mine right now as we speak. And if you go ahead to their website to place an order and you put in the discount code RESPECT7, you're going to get 20% off of your entire order. So again, that discount code is RESPECT7 for 20% off of your entire order at dickcarriers.com. They are respectfully scandalous, yet unapologetic. All right. So Jason, the time comes. Maybe it was right after that Chris Griffiths test. Maybe it was not too long after that. You enter in the conversations, or somebody says something about, hey, what about England? When
Yep,
did
I
that
mean,
conversation start?
so conversation started a year, pretty much exactly after that Chris Griffiths test. But it is a direct result of the Chris Griffiths test. So the test I did it with was with Turn 3. The owner is Peter Dempsey. He's an Irish guy. And if you're in the UK, you know the name Peter Dempsey, or just Dempsey in general when it comes to Formula Fords. And we had spoken over the course of the entire year about opportunities, trying to get me into the car. And it's a high entry point, right? USF 2000 is not a cheap thing to run. Obviously, the USF Pro ladder does a great job with the scholarship fund at the end of the season, but at the end of the day, right, you still have to pay quite a large sum of money to even race for that price, right? So we're talking and we're trying to figure this out. And in the meantime, I'm in my first semester of college at Purdue in Indianapolis. And I'm not having a great time in college. I was already planning on I was already planning on leaving and going somewhere else. And Peter shoots me a text. He's like, "Listen, expect a call from this guy. He's in England. He's got Formula Ford. Do you a good deal. Just expect a call from him." And so I get a call from him, or I get a text, and I'm like, "Yeah, okay, well, I'll talk about it and I'll think about it." And I wasn't really sold because, you know, it just felt a little bit wrong. I was in college. I had an idea for my life ahead of me. And, I really hadn't entertained the thought of going off to another country to race and kind of leaving everything that I worked for behind. But this guy just kept texting me. And it got to a certain point where, doors were starting to close around me, seats were getting filled, things like that. And I'm like, okay, I plan on leaving this college. What else am I gonna do, right? I'm 18. I got nothing to lose. Let's go to England and race cars, right? And so that's what we did. And I had a great program set up for me. Ray Race Cars provided a car for the season for me, and through that, I raced Formula Ford in England for the first time. And from there, kind of set a name for myself on the world stage, as you might call it. And it's been just crazy ever since.
All right, so dude, that opens up even more questions that I have for you, because being in, I mean, back, especially in, when you think about some of the history behind the move that you've made, those were guys that you'd be competing against, like the Martin Brundles, the Ayrton Sennas, the Alain Prost. All those guys ran through that same sort of path that you're on now. But for an American to do it, not a lot of them do. I mean, and especially, when we were talking, prior to the show, I think the only other Chicago area native that's kind of done anything is, I think David Malukas is from that area. But an American in this day and age going to England is no small feat. What are we talking in terms of, what did it take from a budget standpoint to go ahead and say, okay, even though I'm basically okay with stepping away from college right now to go to England, but that obviously you had to put together some funding. How did you manage to put that all together?
Yeah, so it's funny you asked that because I had an offer at the same time to race Formula Ford in the US. And that offer was basically full season for half the price, just flat out half the price, full year of racing. And that was still more expensive than for me to run a full season at a normal price in Formula Ford in the UK. So that was kind of
Wow.
the point of realization where I'm like, okay, yeah, the scholarships and stuff like that don't really exist in the UK, but the cost of entry, it's unmatchable, right? You can make that happen. You can get into those entry level like wings and slicks championships without having to, take a second mortgage out on your house or, sacrifice so much for your family. And that was kind of the thing for me is just, that's an option. So we did end up doing mostly out of pocket for that first year in Formula Ford, but it just opened up so many opportunities. I mean, I showed up, I landed, and I knew one single person, and it's the guy that gave me a call. And from there, I would
Right.
go to races, I would go to meet people, I was handing out business cards. I mean, that first season, I made, so many different connections. I had business cards from Aston Martin, Mercedes, Alpine. I talked to F1 teams, I visited shops, within 1 year of me being in England. And you can't do that in the US. And that was one of the biggest things for me where I just felt like I was making the right decision by doing that because, there was so much opportunity. So, yeah, obviously the cost of entry is a little bit, it's a topic, right? And we'll get more into it because I've got some funny stories from just this past year about that. But yeah, no, it's reasonable in the UK.
Well, and you said a key thing there. You had the opportunity to exchange business cards with the likes of Aston Martin and Alpine and Mercedes and God knows who. And obviously you've run at Silverstone and you're all over those places. Many of the F1 factories are there. So that's an ideal spot. And I think that oftentimes gets overlooked. But some of the other things, continuing to make those connections, and obviously your on track results are everything. But man, when you went and you did Formula Ford, you went in the deep end straight away. I mean, the Formula Ford Festival, for those seventh year Overrev fans that have either not heard of this or have kind of forgotten about it, the Formula Ford Festival in England, I'm just going to say it, it's the shit. You get the
Yeah.
top drivers from all over the place, huge fields. If you fare well there, not that it necessarily guarantees your future, but it does a lot of good for your future. Not to mention the fact that you ran the Walter Hayes Trophy, which is another huge event in Formula Ford. What was it like from a the type of racing? And we were talking about combat ready earlier, right? You got to, if you're not combat tested and or ready in the Formula Ford Festival, you're going to be really quick or you're going to be on the outside looking in. But talk a little bit about the difference in the mentality of the driving in the US versus England when you went over and started running Formula Ford.
It's intense, right? You get in Formula Ford in the US, you get kids that are all ready to win a race, right? And it's pretty similar to karting, right? You've got aggressive drivers. They're a little bit crafty here and there, but ultimately slightly predictable. Like you know what they're gonna do, you know how they're gonna do it, and you can kind of figure it out. I mean, that's what I did in Spec Ford, right? I was running a H pattern gearbox in a generation of set of gearboxes, right? And I was still winning races because you can kind of tell what's going on. When you get to England, you get, especially in Formula Ford, you've got drivers with years and years of experience in that car, with teams that have years and years of experience working on that car, right? And you've got years of development because remember, this is not a spec series, this is a development series. And you can change engines, there's plenty of different engine builders, there's plenty of different manufacturers, you can run different chassis. And oh my gosh, they just pick you apart on track. Next thing you know, you're 10 places down, right? And no matter who you're racing against, it's like you're battling for the lead. It's so strong, it's so aggressive, but it's not stupid racing, it's just very firm.
Yeah, I mean that was always kind of the goal. I mean, of course, we always as drivers have bigger goals, but man, I know when I was coming up, it's like I wanted to run the Formula Ford Festival because you always want to pick as a driver and a racer in particular, you want to put yourself against the best because if you're going to be the best, you got to beat the best, and that's where they all congregate. So as you went through that first season in Formula Ford, how did the discussion about that the series, and I'm going to ask you to kind of explain this to our listeners, of GB4, which I'm going to assume is roughly equivalent to F4 here in the States or elsewhere in Europe. But when did you start having those conversations about moving from Formula Ford up to the next step?
I think I began that conversation probably in around August. I started talking to teams. Obviously, before then, I had gone to a couple of GB4 races, a couple of GT races, British F4, and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so let me start with obviously the explanation because not many people will know this offhand. Obviously, in the US, you've got F4, and then you've got USF 2000 and the USF Pro ladder. I personally like to equate the GB4 and GB3 ladder to the USF Pro situation, right? You've got cars that are almost F4 cars, but they're not quite. They're a little bit different. The British F4 cars are F4 cars through and through. GB4 is just slightly different, more closer to a power to weight ratio similar to the USF 2000. The downforce ratios are a little bit more close to the USF 2000. The differential, all of those sort of things, they're more like a USF 2000. So that progression ladder is a little bit more equivalent to that. And yeah, so we started the discussions in about August, right? I'm talking to teams. There's a couple of teams that are running Formula Ford as well as GB4. There's a couple of people that work in both GB4 and Formula Ford. And at the time, I had met with a manager, a driver manager who used to be a team principal of a GB3 team. And so I was going to him to advice. He became my manager after a little while. And, we were just simply talking about, what the next move was, what the right thing to do was. There were times where I'd go home one weekend and say, I want to do GT4 next year. And there are times where I would want to go home and say, I want to do Spanish F4. There were plenty of options available, right? That's the key is you get to meet so many people. By the end of the season, we kind of realized that we wanted to do GB4. It just made sense because they were getting an upgrade in cars. The series was looking really promising, and I had spoken to the personnel within the series, and I had kind of, found similar ideologies. It just felt like the right fit, right? You know that feeling. You get the right feeling, right? And
Right.
we couldn't really figure out who to run with. We knew that some teams would be entering the series. We didn't know who exactly. We had spoken to some of the teams that were already in the series, and Gary Ward, who's my manager, he one day just talked to me. He's like, I have an idea, and we'll just throw this out there. But I know where we can find a GB4 car. and I know that I can run a GB4 car, and I know engineers that can field this car. We could start a team because I know I could do it right, and you won't have to worry about anything else. And I was sitting in the shop, I'm like, it's a risk, but it's not a bad idea. And so I left and I called my dad. I'm like, so Gary came up with this ridiculous idea, but also it doesn't feel bad either. And so a couple days later, I went and I took a look at that car and I shook his hand and I was like, okay, I'll buy this. And so I took out, because I dropped out of school, I still had college savings. So I took out my college savings account and I bought a race car. And then Gary bought a
Not a
truck
boy.
and a bunch of parts, and we went racing. It's crazy.
So
It
is that
was the
is that
most ridiculous thing.
so is that the birth of the ADM team now?
That is the birth of the ADM team. Yeah, that's how it happened. It's just
So so you have a driver manager that used to be a team principal, and he just throws out this crazy idea, and all of a sudden here we are with a GB4 car and a new team specifically tailored around you.
exactly. Yeah, it was a team, including myself, of 5 people. And that was it. It was Gary. I had
I
2 engineers, and then I had a mechanic, and that was it.
I fucking love it. I love this. This is an awesome story.
Yeah.
So, okay, obviously, we gotta figure out budget stuff here, right? And then we'll get to the expansion of the ADM team because I know you were a big part of helping that team grow. But clearly, there's a difference in budget from Formula Ford to GB4, and then on again to GB3. So you had alluded to some stories earlier about that kind of thing. But what are we talking in terms of general like the budget size jump from Formula Ford to GB4?
Yeah. So I think Formula Ford was around 60,000 pounds for the entire season. Now, you know, that's 2 years ago, so the exchange rate is a little bit different now. That would be a little bit of a stretch for us. Last year, obviously, it jumped up a little bit, but because we had bought the car and because I had basically put my own skin in the game, we were able to afford to race GB4 because I personally had bought the car and my family had just enough equity to run GB4 with the lowered price of having owned the car that we were able to do that. So we just got out by the skin of our teeth. And additionally, with the plan of selling the car at the end of the season, we were expecting to, make a net profit on that car. And so I took that risk. It was a risky investment, but I'd say it paid off a little bit.
I would say so. And if JD is available there in the background, if you can pull up one of the pictures of those cars that we've got set up there, any of the side shots. But yeah, well, that's the
Yeah.
Formula Ford, which is cool
Hmm.
because one of the things I love about the European style of Formula Ford racing is that they run on treaded tires and not the slicks to give you
Yeah.
that false sense of grip. You really gotta hustle those things to get the most out of them. But
Yeah.
that black and blue, yeah, here we go, like you in the rain.
There we go. Yeah.
So as this image comes up, what track was this at,
This
Jason?
is at Donington. Yeah. So that's
Gotcha.
Silverstone. Yeah. And I remember that picture because, oh my gosh, that rain was. We were. They ended up having to cancel that day. Obviously, there's the joke, it rains in England. It rains in England. Like,
Oh
oh
yeah.
my, right? So I thought it was a good rain driver. There were times where I gotten into a couple of other USF 2000 tests here and there. There was one instance I remember at Autobahn where it started raining and we were out with USF Pro 2000s and USF 2000s. And it started raining and I was the fastest car on track in the USF 2000 when there were a bunch of USF Pro 2000s on track. So I thought to myself, I'm a pretty good driver in the rain. And then you get to England and these guys live in the rain, and then you realize maybe you're not that good, you know? Maybe
Yeah,
maybe there's another
when
level to
that's
it.
the That's right. So, how long did it take you to feel like you had upped your rain game? Because, see, for me, that was always the thing that I was waiting for, man. It's like I would love it to rain because, like you've been through this. It's like, if you don't have the newest car and the hottest motor, you need a little bit of a break, right, to equalize the field. And if you can get some rain, then the brand new cars and the new engines and everything can't always use all that power. So, you wanted that great equalizer, as they always say. But when did you feel like you kind of took that next step in your rain skills?
I think it was in the United Formula Ford round four, I think it was at Brands Hatch. We had one race in the rain that weekend. And Brands Hatch is a really weird circuit because it's right by an airport. It's similar to Donington, right? Right by an airport. So planes fly overhead and you get a lot of jet fuel dumped on the track. And when it rains,
Wow.
all that jet fuel comes right back up and it's slippery. And of course, it's Brands Hatch, so there's really only one line. But we were running like I think I was running fourth at the time, fourth or third, and it started to rain, and I was like a second away from the lead pack, and started to rain, and second the rain hit there, everyone else was going off track, and I was just on the edge, and every single lap I'm catching them by like 2 tenths, 3 tenths every lap. Of course, my drivetrain breaks and I don't finish the race, but I would have won it. That's what I like to say. But that was the moment where I'm like, okay, I'm getting the hang of this now, right? I'm faster than the guys that are, I've been racing this track for many years, that have been racing in the rain for many years. Now I'm into my headspace of like, okay, yeah, I can handle these conditions. Now, there's been some days like that picture at Donington, it was flooded so bad that the car was literally floating on top of puddles, so my front wheels weren't even touching the ground. And that's where it's like it's a little bit sketchy, but you can still learn how to
Yeah.
drive in that. I think I was running like top five in that. So, I'm definitely starting to get hang of it. But the rain tires are a completely different story as well. They're different than what I'm used to, the European spec tires.
Yeah, I can imagine so. And you're right. When you've got that much rain, and you basically don't have the front end feels light. It feels like the steering's not really responsive. You got to do a whole lot more steering with your right foot than anything else. Um, but I'm curious, before we get too far down the line, it sounds like if, and I think seventh gear over viewers and listeners might be following this, with a lot of the things that you've talked about so far and the stories that you've told. I mean, you don't really have any people there in England with you. You were there by yourself. You knew one person, the guy that was texting you, but you constantly were churning relationships, working the pit lane, going to shops, going to attending events, meeting people. So when you got there, I mean, were you basically living in the shop, or did you like share a place with
No,
somebody? I mean, how did that all work? Because of course you had the money was obviously, you had to be careful with money. That I'm sure you had only
mhm.
so many finite amount of funds.
Yeah. Yeah, so it basically there's a in the UK, a lot of people might know this. I think they have it in the US as well. There's a website called Spare Room, and this is basically a house share website. And because I didn't have like a official, there's visa stuff, right? And it's hard to get a place to live without certain forms. And so you can't rent an apartment. Obviously, I wouldn't buy a house, but like I said, you can't rent an apartment. And that's like the big block. So the first year I went to get a house share. So I just shared a house with some random people. And I think one of them was a police officer, one of them was a caretaker. Didn't know them, didn't know anyone there. It's like it's hard to describe. Looking back on it, it's just the funniest thing sometimes. But yeah, it's you do what you can, right?
Well, and
So
I asked that
that's
question because, I remember hearing stories from back in the day about, the guys that would go over there, whether it was like Roberto Guerrero from, Colombia or whatever. And, they'd be basically taking a spare room in the shop, like in the mezzanine area and sleep in the shop and, help out the because they didn't have any money for anything else. So I was just kind of curious in this day and age, how your experience related to that. And then now you've mentioned that you've actually told the story, but as you go through this GB4 deal and you put this team together with Gary, I'm curious because now we're already talking about the ADM team growing and expanding. Was this another harebrained idea from Gary, or did you come to him with this and say, "Hey, we could actually grow this thing"? Where did that whole the impetus for that come about?
Yeah, especially in motorsports of all things, I kind of live it by not even a year at a time, but weeks at a time, right? So, I had the plan to do GB4, and then obviously the story was, try to find a team in GB3 to move up next year, or something along those lines. And in the meantime, while I was racing, doing all my stuff, visiting tracks and things like that, I ended up starting to work for a kart team. And while I was working for a karting team doing, instructing, wrenching, stuff like that, Gary also owned a mobile kart shop. And he didn't make any money off of the race team. He didn't even take a paycheck. And the whole idea was his kart shop was his way to make money, his way to pay rent and things like that, just as much as, me working for a kart team was my way to pay rent. And at that, we would always go and visit each other, right? Because we're at the same races and things like that. And I'm working with a bunch of young drivers who are interested in racing cars and things like that. And somebody walks onto Gary's kart shop one day and is talking about how good the setup looks and things like that. Because Gary does things well. And he's looking at pictures and he's looking at like TV footage and stuff because it's me. And then he makes the connection and is like, oh, that's ADM. And then, oh yeah, the shop is also ADM. And he's like, well, what's this about? Do you sponsor them? And he's like, no, we own a race team. And it just so happened that this guy that he was talking to was the owner of OMG Racing, which is a British Superbikes team. The British Superbikes team that has won the championship the past 2 years. So
Wow.
by just ridiculous luck and a little bit of, you know, knowing how to be in the right place at the right time and giving people the opportunity to speak and giving people the opportunity to have a talk, right? We met this person who was an owner of a British Superbikes racing team and happened to be interested in investing into a Formula Car team. And so we had this situation where it's like, okay, well, we've got one GB4 car, and you've got all these other teams, right, that have already got established programs, or you could build your own empire, right? And so we went from this one car program to October, we set up a 6 car program. And we went from having a 1 car truck with no office or anything like that to having 2 big rigs and a van and another support truck. And it's just, I mean, I can't wait to see what this year has to offer because it's just, again, you can't make these kinds of stories up, right? They just have to
I was gonna
happen.
say, are you
And that's
kidding
that's
me right
exactly
now?
what it is. Yeah, it's the craziest thing. So we went from this crazy idea in October of 2024 where it's just like, hey, why don't we make a team because we think we can do it better? To now we've got not only a GB4 team, but a GB3 team as well in a serious program. And it blows my mind because this is the type of stuff I would daydream of when I'm in school. I'm like, oh man, wouldn't it be great if I just met someone who could build a team around me and I could have this progression and all this stuff. And it's like, it is great, yeah.
And boom, here that's you're right. It's almost unbelievable, especially in the time frame from October of 2024 to now. And you've already tested the
Yeah.
GB3 car. So that's obviously the plan for 2026. I know you mentioned maybe even before we came on the show that the 2026 schedule might be a little bit messy, but what is 2026 looking like for you right now, Jason?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a jump up. Like we talked about financially, it's not the easiest situation, right? The jump from GB or from Formula Ford to GB4 is manageable, right? It's a British series, right? So you race only in England. My schedule so far for GB3 is Silverstone, Spa, Hungaroring, and Red Bull Ring, all F1 tracks all around Europe, right? So it's a pretty intense schedule, right? And those traveling costs combined with the cost of the car and the fuel and the tires and all that sort of stuff, it gets expensive. there's obviously four more rounds, right? We've got Brands GP, Donington GP, uh, Circuit de Barcelona Catalunya, and then another Silverstone round. So we don't have the money for the full season yet. We're trying to figure that out because, I have to be in the spotlight. I have to continue racing in order to continue my career, right? And the best thing to do is to follow my progression as intended, you know, and live race by race because, to an extent, that's what we've been doing this whole time. And, as long as I'm performing to the best of my ability, I know I can continue racing. So this is a great opportunity, from the GB3 perspective to get myself into some more intense machinery to, expand my skill set as it were, as a driver being capable of driving a car as intense as that. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. It's, I think, 1,400 pounds with 310 horsepower. So it's a fast car. It's got
Yeah,
DRS.
that's the real deal.
It's a serious piece of thing. Yeah. So being able to drive that means I can drive all sorts of things. And that's the key this year is to prove myself in a car like that so that others will understand that I can drive pretty much anything else.
Right. So obviously, budget is always a concern, but I guess fortunately, now that we know that you now have a 6 car team behind you, they can kind of defer some of those running costs based on the other guys that they have running the in within the team. Whereas, when it was just you and Gary, if that was the case, well, then maybe we got to look at some other things. So at least you got that to kind of help absorb some of that overhead, so to speak. But let's say for the sake of discussion, since you apparently are blessed with all of these great things, whether it was Gary or this guy that walked into the shop to make this all happen, let's say that you get the rest of the budget that you need. And by the way, I'm really jealous that you're going to run at Spa, by the way. So I just want to put that out there. At any rate, let's say you get to run the full season, things go well. Do you stay in GB3 another season, or do you look to make a jump to what's after that?
It really all depends on two things, which is performance and budget, right? That's the name of the game in racing, right? So, I have to be doing well in order to move up, right? Because there's no real reason for me to, move on if I'm not capable of moving on, right? GB4
Right.
is a little bit of an exception, right? This past season wasn't the easiest for me. I performed pretty well below my personal standards and just my standards in general of driving. But that being said, a lot happened, right? You think about it, you're a one-car team going up against five other three-car teams and a couple of two-car teams. You're a brand new team. You got five people, including yourself, right? There's all sorts of details that go into racing, right? And the performance that I had that year, while I don't think it reflected the best that I can do, I still, am going to take it with a grain of salt because at the end of the day, I know what I'm capable of. I know what I've been able to do in the GB3 car thus far. And so, from what I've seen within myself, I could totally see myself moving up to FIA F3 next year if it's, an option, right? Because that's really the natural progression. You go from the GB3 or a regional F3 to FIA F3 and then F2, F1, right? That's, of course, the ideal world. But I keep my options open, right? I'm a first generation driver, so if I can make a living out of racing, then I've done exactly what I want to do, right? I'm gonna shoot as high as I can, as high as I can see, but I don't mind anything, right? I love all forms of racing, right? And I love endurance racing in particular. And I can totally see myself ending up in a position like that, especially being in Europe with so many options available to me. There's British GT, there's WEC, there's European Le Mans Series. There's so many options, right? And that's what it's about. So, it's doing the same thing that I've been doing since Formula Ford, which is running around the paddock, sharing my business card, things like that. It's just how to keep going.
Yeah, and sometimes that's easier easier said than done, right? Unless you get the luck of the Irish falling upon you, like the OMP guys. But and I'm glad you laid that out because that was going to be one of my questions for you because I'm not sure that everybody here in the States understands the progression from a regional Formula Car series like you're in with GB4 and then GB3. So if things continue to go well, it would be GB3, then you'd go FIA F3, then F2, and then hopefully in the grand scheme of things, we're looking at you on an F1 grid here in a handful of years. Is that about right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's the ideal world. Of course, there's a lot of opportunities in the US as well. I'd love to have the opportunity to come back and live in the US again. It's there's nothing against England, but there's no place like home. So if I
Sure.
can find myself in an Indy next seat for next year, or even somehow in an IndyCar seat, obviously I think that's a bit of a stretch, but like I said, finding myself in a seat in the US is just as feasible as it is in Europe. And I'm open to those kinds of options.
Well, and you've got some connections within that series too. You had Hunter McElroy, working with you a little bit there too, and he's very familiar with the Indy Next series. But um, and I know that you and I were talking earlier that you're a big IndyCar fan, and I want to talk a little bit about that here in a second. But before we do, I'm still so fascinated with all of your experiences and stories from England and like how this all came together and everything. I gotta believe you've got some crazy ass other story, at least one, probably numerous, of maybe something that happened at track or in the shop or a interaction, maybe not the most pleasant with another driver. Let's come on, pull some crazy story out. I know you got them. I know
Okay.
you got them.
Yeah. I'll give two. I'll give two. So when I'm working with, these karting drivers, a lot of the times, I'll share my stories and things like that, and they'll ask like, "Oh, have you ever had a big crash?" And I have. I crashed to Spec MX-5 at Road Atlanta and once at Daytona, so I've had my fair share of crashes. But then I told them, I'm like, I flipped a cart, but I've never flipped a car yet. And I'm sure it'll happen at some point, but I haven't yet. 2 weeks later, my next race. I'm doing a historic exhibition race sort of deal at Thruxton, which for those who don't know is like it's I think the fastest circuit in the UK, right? In the Formula Ford, there are two corners that you brake at. The rest of them completely flat out, like not even a thought of a lift. And
Nuts.
we get the white flag, and actually we didn't even get the white flag, but they I think we did. Yeah, I think we did get the white flag. And coming around turn one, the flat out corner, right? Going about, it's a Formula Ford, so a comfortable 100 miles per hour. You know, sitting comfortably, all of a sudden the left rear just falls, right? And it turned out that my left rear wheel fell off. It didn't fall off, the hub cracked, but long story short, left rear wheel gone. And so out of control sliding, hit the grass, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, now I got to keep it out of the wall. Or at least it wasn't even that. It was me thinking to myself, I'm going to pick the least painful angle to hit this wall because I knew I was going to hit it, right? And then the second I hit the grass, the hub digs into the grass, the dirt, and I just shoot right over. And so in a Formula Ford at like 100 miles per hour, I barrel roll 4 times, land into a catch fence, and then on top of an Armco barrier. I would have kept rolling for miles. But so yeah, it's like, I talked myself right into it. I'm the type of person that loves to tempt fate, right? So I'll throw another one out there. Same situation where I'm telling this karting kid, I'm like, yeah, I've never caught on fire before. And I don't know what it is. Maybe I should start talking about winning because a couple of weeks later, what do you know, at Silverstone, I catch on fire. And so I've been racing for a while, right? I've flipped in a cart, I've done all sorts of things. I've smashed into walls, I've broken cars, blown up engines. But like the two big things, right? You've got flipping and you've got catching on fire, right? Neither of which you want to do, but they're always good stories to tell. In the span of 2 years, I'm doing both of that. It's so yeah, both of those they're funny stories to look back on because it's like, yeah, you ended up fine. So
Right, exactly. Yeah, I'm all right. I'm here to talk about it. No big deal. Nothing to see here. But
yeah,
clearly, you made the highlight reel on those events. It's kind of like those old, if
yeah,
you remember those Havoc videos they used to have in the 1980s, where it was just a compilation of like British Formula Ford doing barrel rolls and you know
yeah.
calamity and all that kind of or saloon car stuff. So I got to ask, being so immersed in all of the motorsports history that's there in England, you talk about these tracks, whether it's Silverstone, Snetterton, Donington, Thruxton. Do you kind of do you kind of get a new appreciation for kind of everything that's happened in that part of the world in the past when it comes to motorsports?
It's cool to look at it and think about like the level of care and the level of history. Like, in the US to an extent, it feels like a little bit of motorsports is about making money, which is a completely ridiculous idea. You don't make money in motorsports, but people in the US sort of still think that that's possible, which it is. I don't want to steer any away from sponsorships, but it is possible. The thing is, though, it's just motorsports exists and has existed in the UK for such a long time that it's just impossible for people to imagine life without racing, right? And that's the biggest thing, right? You get people in the US who think about racing, have maybe heard of it, might even know what Indy cars look like. You walk around and in the grocery store, you probably meet two or three people that work for Formula One teams because that's just how it is. I think I read a study the other day. It's motorsports accounts for 10% of the GDP of the UK alone, which is pretty ridiculous when you think about how many other industries that can exist in the UK. And, if you compare that to the US, now obviously it's a lot bigger of a country, but even if you compared it to Indiana, I'm sure it's comparable to Indiana, but what else is there besides the 500 in that state? So
Right.
it's that
Right.
kind of thing where it's just racing exists in the UK because it always has. Obviously that's not true, but you know, this is a number of generations now who have lived with motorsports, whereas in the US you kind of have like one or two, maybe three generations now. You probably will get that sort of vibe from NASCAR a little bit more, right? Where there's a little bit more history involved. But the willingness that NASCAR has to change as opposed to motorsports in the UK is a little bit different. So I think like where you look at motorsports in the UK, it's relatively similar from a mindset perspective versus in NASCAR, it's changed quite a lot. But I think if I were to compare anything, it's just the history that NASCAR has in the US is comparable to the history that racing as a whole exists in the UK. So it's
Well,
really
and you
nice to
think
see.
too. Yeah, I think for any kind of motorsports aficionado, whether you're just a fan or you're a driver or you work there, I think you kind of can't avoid that history, and I think you appreciate it. And I think we get so focused on the car racing part of the that being the industry in the UK, but like you're finding it's like let's not forget about bikes. I mean, bikes are a big deal there too. I mean, let's like talk about Isle of Man. I mean, all of those things that are all centric to that part of the world. So yeah, that's an experience I think that is certainly going to help not just you but anybody that appreciates that type of thing. So I got to ask too, since we alluded to IndyCar and you're an IndyCar fan. So I asked this question of a lot of the drivers and teams here, and you kind of have a unique perspective on it because you're from here, but you're kind of operating over there. What did you think of Alex Palou's performance last year? Because to me, I'm like, as you well know, the depth of talent in the IndyCar series right now is not unlike the depth of talent in the Formula Ford Festival, right? Everybody is good, but I kept asking him, I'm like, so Will Power's no slouch. Joseph Newgarden's no slouch. Neither is Kyle Kirkwood or anybody else. So how is Palou making them look like fools? So what's your take on the upcoming IndyCar season that opens this weekend here in St. Pete?
Well, I'll tell you, I am so excited for it, right? Like I can't I don't know what it is, if it's just because I haven't been in a car for such a long time since October, right? So I'm out of the car. I'm itching. It's like I'm ready to get back into racing, right? And I've been watching the Formula One testing. So I think any form of racing I can get my hands on, I'll watch. But IndyCar, I mean, on the topic of Hello last year, I mean, unbelievable, right? And I think motorsports and sports in general, but most importantly in motorsports, it's such a mental game compared to anything else. I could harp on and on about it and how important having that mental capacity to be absolutely flawless in racing is. And this isn't to say anything against the other drivers, but Alex Palou is just like he knows his brain in and out, and he knows how his mind works, and he can harness everything that he has in order to be the best driver possible. He just doesn't make mistakes, right? I think last year he made one single mistake the entire season. I don't even remember
Yep.
what race it was, but I do remember there was one, and that was
Yep. Mid
it,
Ohio.
right? He's just that good of a driver. And you combine that with the fact that Chip Ganassi is arguably the best team in the championship by a considerable margin. Um, just, from there, I've spoken to people on the team that just they have such a good team surrounding their strategy department, especially, and their setups are just incredible, right? They know this new generation of IndyCar, the hybrid, so well, right? And we can get into the talk of the hybrid, how Polo has managed to understand the weight distribution of that car so perfectly compared to everyone else. Yeah, it's just a combination of the best driver and the best team, and that's what leads to it. I mean, you see that kind of stuff in Formula One, right? And obviously, we'll talk about how Formula One, the car disparity is much different, right? Because everyone is running the same chassis in IndyCar and things, but there is a difference team to team, right? There's a reason that some teams win more than others, and it's the type of dominance that you see out of, Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen when they are the best driver and they are the best team. And that's just what we're seeing. And I'm all for it. I mean, I love Alex Palou as a person, as a driver. I love CGR as a team, as an organization. Like, nothing wrong with them. I love them. And so I'm excited. I'll be cheering for Palou this year again because I just want to see success from him. But yeah, I mean, there's a reason that he's winning races. It's just because simply he's the best.
He really is, and that team has the mistakes that they make are so few and far between, and when they do make them, they're much smaller than all of the other teams' mistakes that they're making. So there's just, and you well know, I mean, the margin for error, especially when you get to the sharper end of the stick, is so minuscule that every little advantage you can get is going to work to your favor. Speaking of Formula One, obviously we've had several days of preseason testing, and we're a week away from the season opener there, and there's some favorites, there's some concerns, what's going on with Max, what's going on with the Adrian Newey's first, Aston Martin, how about Cadillac, what about Haas, is Lewis back, all these things. So out of all the stuff that you've been seeing from the preseason testing, and of course there's always the infamous sandbagging from the haves and the have nots, but what do you take from all the preseason testing in F1 thus far?
Absolutely nothing. I think the only thing that
See,
you
I
can
was right.
talk about is, yeah, I think you can talk about, besides the top four, so from fifth on back, that order is probably pretty secure, right? The midfield is nice and close. You've got Alpine, Haas are doing well. Who else? I mean, Audi is pretty impressive. I mean, even compared to the green tractor last year, they're doing pretty well. But yeah, you've got these midfield teams, and they're doing amazing, between themselves, right? But that order probably true because they're operating at their best. But yeah, absolutely not with the top four teams. I don't know what to expect. I do think that Mercedes is probably the favorite. But again, McLaren has a Mercedes engine, and arguably they're the better manufacturer, right? From a chassis perspective. So who knows, right? There's so much up in the air, and you're just not going to know until the green flag or, the end of Q3, right? That's all you can do is wait
Right.
because now we're talking about engine plan Bs and things like that from the FIA and lowering the power or lowering the deployment percentages. And Red Bull has been great with the energy management, but if the FIA evens the field by changing the deployment restrictions, then maybe Red Bull loses that advantage. Depends on how long that Ferrari rear wing lasts, if they're going to allow that to continue going. So there's so much stuff
That's a
that we're just not
crazy
going to know
design.
about until I love it. I absolutely love it. It's the coolest thing I've ever seen. It's so it you know, obviously you look back on it and it's like, oh, how did nobody think of it? Because it does make
I right?
sense, right? It's such a cool thing. I love it. It's the coolest thing, and I'd love to see it stay in the sport too, because I know the FIA does have a tendency to kind of, take away a little bit of innovation, obviously in the face of budget restrictions, right? But some innovation needs to stay, right? And that's such a cool concept, and it
Right.
can't be that expensive for the other teams, and it opens up a whole can of worms. Like, what else can you do with the rear wing to make it do that kind of stuff, right? Are you
Right.
gonna put
Yeah.
wicks on the bottom of it now? Or are you gonna like? There's so many options, so it opens up so many more things that I think you have to let it simmer and let things happen for a little bit before you make any restrictions. But yeah, that one of those things that I can just talk on and on about because it's racing and that's what we love.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. All right. So one last question about Formula One, though, Jason, and we'll kind of move on from there. But is it true, in your opinion, the worst seat in the house in Formula One is being number two to Max Verstappen?
No, no, I don't think so. I mean, in the past years, maybe, but I think it's got less to do with being teammates with Max and more to do with just the fact that Red Bull had a rough time, with their management issues and things like that. And there's a lot of politics within the team that has, again, less to do with being teammates with Max and more to do with being just simply the second driver in Red Bull. I feel bad for Yuki because I personally think he's a good driver. That car wasn't fantastic, but he did well in the RBC, so it's sad to see him go. I'm excited for Hajar at the same time to be in there, but there's definitely worse. I don't want to name names because I don't want to set any bad
That's
reputation
right.
with myself with
You
any
got too
F1
much at
teams.
stake there. Right.
Yeah, but I think like, there's teams that I would just wholly rather not be in, right? Than be the second seat to Max. I think there's a lot you can learn from being the second driver to Max. And at the end of the day, you're a Red Bull driver. You probably get free Red Bull. That's not a bad deal either. So there's plenty of options. I think it's fine. It can't be that bad.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Even the worst seat in F1, you're still making big money, and you get to do what everybody. I mean, there's only what now 22 of them. There's thousands of us's out there that wish we had one of those 22 seats. So yeah, no matter how bad you think it is, it's still something to strive for. Um, Getting
Yeah.
back to your 2026 schedule, I know you're getting ready to head on a plane here in just a couple days to head back to England. So when are you back in a car, and when is that first race in your currently limited schedule happening?
Alrighty, let me look that up. I know my first test day is March 10th, but
So it's
I'm
coming up
pretty bad
fast.
at yeah, I'm pretty bad at working up my calendar, so I'm gonna just let you know in a second. I go when they tell me to go. The 25th of April is my first race at Silverstone. So I'm doing the first four rounds of the season. Nothing, no races specific in particular. Just start the season and try to finish it, right? But yeah, so we get more testing than I did last year. I get 3 weekends of testing. So last year I think I did 4 days total. This time I'll do 6 days of preseason testing, which is great. The car's got a couple of new upgrades. So last year the GB3 car had decent amount of downforce. It had 285 horsepower. This year it's moving up to 310 horsepower and getting a little bit more downforce as well because last year there were some talks about the DRS not doing as much as people were hoping for. So we're getting more downforce so that the DRS will do more. Obviously to add with the power as well because yeah, we just like to go fast. So I'm
Yeah,
excited to try out the
exactly.
new spec. It's going to be, I'm sure MSV is going to do a great job. They've been taking their time on it, which, obviously you can complain about it or whatnot, but at least they're going to take the time to do it right, and I appreciate that from them. And at the end of the day, they're getting it done for the first test, so can't complain there as well. But yeah, no, obviously I'm looking forward to that, and yeah, that's about it.
S-
I'm excited.
All right. So seventh year overhead fans, we'll get a hold of Jason's schedule here for his series in Europe coming up shortly, and we'll include that here in the links to the show. But if people want to kind of follow along and watch your races, Jason, how do they can they watch you in the GB3 Championship?
Yeah, yeah. So all of our races are live streamed on YouTube. I think it's just on MSV TV. It's free to watch, nice and easy. If you want to watch the GB4 stuff, I may or may not be doing some co-commentary on that. I did some commentary last year on GB3, and obviously since I'm racing GB3 this year, I can't be commentating on that. So you might hear me if you're watching the GB4 races. But yeah, every race is available on MSV TV. You'll get like the 30 minutes of introduction. You might see me in a couple of interviews beforehand, and then racing starts. They're 25-minute races, so nice long races, good tests of endurance, especially in these cars because they're pretty physical. And yeah, that's how to watch. And then if you want to follow me along, I've got Instagram, so it's just Jason Pribyl on Instagram, or I think it's Jason.Pribyl on Instagram. We've got a YouTube channel as well. I might post. I haven't in a year, but I might. Um, and then obviously on Facebook, LinkedIn, it's the same thing. Jason Pribyl, Jason Pribyl Autosports. Follow those accounts, and you'll get updates on me as well as just get to know me a little bit better. Because while we've talked quite a lot, there's a lot more to all of us. As drivers, there's we're an interesting bunch, and so you can definitely see a lot of different sides of me. So yeah, give me a follow, and I appreciate it. And yeah, I think that about
Perfect.
covers it.
All right. So as we get ready to throw the checkered flag on this week's episode of Seventh Year Over Ev. So Jason, I know we've covered a lot of ground here in a relatively short amount of time. It's hard to believe we've been chatting for over an hour at this point. But is there anything that
Yeah.
we haven't addressed yet or talked about that you wanted to make sure that we talked about before you jettison yourself off to the far reaches of England?
I feel like I've done a good job. I've done a lot of rambling, and I think I got a lot of my points out. So,
Hey, that's my job.
I
That's my
enjoy
job to
talking.
ramble.
Yeah, I enjoy talking about racing, and I think we've done a great job. I appreciate talking about the IndyCar season and looking forward to IndyCar and F1 and all that kind of stuff because I think this year is going to be a great year for both. I'm looking forward to it, and yeah, I think that's a great way to top it off.
Perfect. Well, Jason, man, it's been so awesome to get to know you a little bit here today, and I appreciate you carving out the time as you're getting ready to head to England. And we wish you nothing but the best. And I would absolutely love to have you back on. Maybe we can tap into you at some point if you've got a gap in your schedule while you're overseas. We're expanding. We one of our recent guests, and now we have a stock car correspondent in the Southeast. We've got an IndyCar correspondent now on the West Coast. Maybe we'll have a European correspondent with you if we can tap into you here and there. Maybe get what it's like in-person life on the road in England. But dude, again, so grateful for the time today. I wish you nothing but the best. Seventh year Overhead fans, man, back this young man. He's a cool dude. He's a racer at heart. That's what we love here at the show. And we can't cheer him on anymore other than throwing cash at him. And you already know how to do that. So like I said, we'll throw his schedule up at the bottom of the post here for the show. But Jason, thanks again, man. It's been awesome to get to know you. Like I said, best of luck. I hope everything comes up aces for you, and hopefully you get that budget to finish the rest of the season. And we're looking forward to talking with you again.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. Obviously, racing is an expensive sport, and so if you know anybody who's interested in supporting a racing driver, especially an American who is interested in supporting anyone in Europe, then I think I might be your guy. But yeah, I appreciate that. Reach out to us on our website or social media, anything like that. But it's been a pleasure talking to you, Kevin.
Well, this dude has a knack for making things happen. Whether it was with his man Gary to form the team in the first place or the expansion. So if you're looking for maybe a little, the odds stacked in your favor on a lottery ticket or something like that, you could do a lot worse than partnering up with Jason Pribyl and his team. So if there's no reason not to like and want to watch this kid continue to excel. So Jason, best of everything, brother. Appreciate it. Appreciate you coming on, and I look forward to seeing you again soon, man. Best of luck with everything.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Talk to you soon.
Well, you got it. Well, there you have it, Seventh Gear Over F fans. Like I said, our new friend of the show, fellow racer, brothers in arms, so to speak, the one and only Jason Pribyl, looking to make his mark in English GB3 series here. So, man, this is what it's all about, right? Is being able to get some of these stories, be able to tell these things from people that are actually out there doing it, like we've been doing over these 7 seasons of the show. So once again, Seventh Year Overhead fans, make sure that you're hitting that subscribe button, subscribing to the channel, so that we can continue to grow beyond the 117 countries that were heard and listened to and viewed, as well as over 12,000 downloads. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button so you can get notified, so that you don't miss a thing from the latest in the greatest spectacle in podcasting, the Seventh Gear Over Rev Show. We'll see you.